Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag and drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to The Next Reel. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
In just a matter of seconds, you're going to hear a classic episode of this show from back in the day when we called ourselves Movies We Like.
It took us a while to settle into the show's format, so you'll notice some differences as you listen to these episodes. For instance, it takes us a bit of time to actually get into the conversation about the movie. Things like that.
But we're still proud of the conversations about the movies themselves, and we think they're worth keeping in the library.
So enjoy these episodes from our back catalog. And you can become part of our Discord community, learn more about the show, and find out how you can become a supporting member at thenextreel.com.
So thank you, everybody, for downloading and listening to The Next Reel. We appreciate your time and attention, and we hope you enjoy the show. I think the big challenge with this particular show is that I don't have a very good Swedish accent.
The thing about speaking in Swedish is you have to know how to properly use your umlauts. It's very important.
That's probably true. It's more of a sound.
I'm going to let you be the one to try that on the air rather than me. It was really fantastic listening to you do that. Yeah.
Umlaut.
Something like that.
I think if anything, that may be the one thing I can hang my hat on for my Swedish is my umlaut.
Is your umlaut? Well, you're better than I.
Umlaut. You have to get just to that point where you're about to kick in your gag reflex. I think that's the.
Is that what it takes?
I think that's what it takes.
There's a hint of gag reflex that you got to make sure you throw in there in order to really get it working right.
How much did you love this movie?
I really loved the movie. I thought it was fantastic, and that's coming from a person who's read the trilogy and watched the Swedish trilogy. I think that they just the whole team from top down, bottom up, whichever way you want to look at it, really crafted a film that just set out exactly what they were aiming to do, and I loved it.
We are, of course, talking about The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, the 2011 revisioning of the 2009 hit film based on the earlier 2000s book by not the same name by Stieg Larsson.
From what was that, 2008?
2008, yeah.
Something like that.
So I think the first question, and I'm really interested in your position on this, because so the director of the Swedish film, whose name is not easy to pronounce, Nils Arden Oplev.
That's pretty good.
There is, in fact, there probably is an umlaut in his name. Nils Arden Oplev is on the record as saying that this movie should not have been made. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo prime should not have been made. It was only released a couple of years ago. What's your take on should this movie have been made, the Fincher version?
Well, yeah, because his was released in the U.S. in March 2010. Mm-hmm. In fact, all three of not his. He only directed the first. I think someone else directed the second and third films. But they were all released in the U.S. in 2010 at the same time that Scott Rudin over at Columbia Pictures was pushing to get the English version made, which they started... he got David Fincher on board in April 2010. I found it very strange when I first heard that they were doing it. Remakes have been made, countless times. All the way back through the history of film. It's a very popular thing to do. The fact that it was made a year after the previous one, I was really skeptical that it was going to do anything different than the previous one did. I didn't really see a reason for it, especially since the original was in Swedish. The story was a Swedish story that took place in Sweden. I thought they did a fantastic job with the films the first go around. I didn't really see why we had to kind of redo them. Now, that being said, David Fincher is my favorite director, and I had to give him a little credit for trying to take on that task of making a remake, basically like within 2 years from when the original came out. And
it's such an American thing to do.
It is.
Doesn't it? Isn't it? This is such a showcase of American sort of Hollywood studio ego.
Yeah.
To do this with arguably bigger global names and attaching a guy like Fincher to it, who is on a string of such successes. It's such a, you know what else it is? I think it's almost a showcase of protecting us from our own sort of anti-intellectual celebration of anti-intellectualism, as if we're not capable of enjoying a film with subtitles.
Well, yeah, I think that's very much it. I mean, the ego thing, I think, has a lot to do with it. Unfortunately, I think the vast masses of America are probably not running out to watch any movie that has subtitles.
Right. And that's sad. That should be sad. We should be sad about that.
We should be sad about that. It's and for whatever reason it has, whether we've actually created that ourselves by the Hollywood system pushing so many American and English language films on us constantly. I mean, they make so many. Our theaters are just constantly full of them, whether they're good or not.
Most of the time, you don't even know. Most of the time, you don't even know that this was based on a film that the movie you're watching was based on a foreign film, some Indian film, some German film. You don't even know that it was based on something else.
Yeah, I would be.
I think back to my favorites like La Femme Nikita.
Yeah,
terrific film. I was actually surprised Run Lola Run wasn't made into the German film Run Lola Run wasn't made into a terrific, big blockbuster English movie.
Well, I think it says a lot that the only Oscar that Martin Scorsese has won in all of the very original and unique films that he's made over his career has been a remake of I can't remember if it was a Japanese or Hong Kong. I think it was a Hong Kong film for The Departed.
Right.
That was a remake that he did fantastically,
which was fantastic.
That was a great film, but I'd be hard pressed to find even a handful of people. If I just walked around my neighborhood going door to door polling people who had seen The Departed versus who had seen the original, I almost would guarantee I wouldn't find a single one, or maybe one or two, who had seen the actual, original film that had been based on.
Right. Now, that said, I feel like, there we have a great sort of the same situation with The Departed that we have here with Dragon Tattoo, which is a fantastic property in Stieg Larsson's novel in the hands of a terrifically talented team.
Yeah,
with Fincher and the folks that came together to make this movie. It's a little bit. I mean, our show has not been on that long, but I feel a little bit out of sorts talking about a movie that is currently in theaters.
Yeah,
because
and only just
right. I mean, I've only seen
days.
It once. Right.
Right.
By the time people are listening to this, the movie will have been out for several weeks, but it is still very new, and we're still sort of wrapping our heads around. And I definitely want to see it again in theaters. It was a terrific film, but I want to start by what really stands out to you as what this movie does right. What strikes you as particularly powerful in the Fincher version?
Well, I think in order to I guess we can talk about that without talking too much about the Swedish version.
Yeah, I was struggling with that.
In a sense, you almost have to, kind of compare the two if you're going to talk about what his does right.
Well, first you almost need to compare it to the book.
Yeah, and I think in both cases, both sets of filmmakers actually managed to really pull out the right bits and kind of leave them aside when they made the film versions. And they're definitely different. Both versions, left some things in that the other one didn't and things like that, but they both tell a solid tale, and I think audiences will end up being pleased with both of them. The interesting thing about the Fincher version, which I probably should attribute to Steven Zalian, who wrote the screenplay.
Script, sure.
And I mean, he's a fantastic screenwriter who, for all intents and purposes, is probably having one of his best years, having written this and Moneyball in the same year. I think he's gonna you'll be hearing a little bit of his name come award season. But the thing that I really liked about this film that the Swedish version didn't do quite as much. This film wasn't afraid to pull little bits from the second and not really the third book, but from the second book, kind of drop little bits in from other things that happen later.
Right. I need to check. You need to check me on that then, because I have not read the second or third book, so this is a spoiler show for me, and I'm totally okay with that. What did they bring
huge.
In? Are we talking about character stuff or?
Yeah, it's just little things, but I think one thing that was completely left by the wayside in the first movie, the Swedish movie, was Lisbeth Salander's relationship with her previous. What's the role called? The guy who watches over her.
Oh yeah, she was his. Well,
she was his ward,
and he was her. Not I'm going to say parole officer, but that's not it. She was a ward of the state, and he was her
legal guardian.
Yeah,
right?
her guardian.
Yeah, her guardian.
That's what it is.
Her first legal guardian, Holger Palmgren,
who had the stroke.
Who has the stroke? We actually see, the scene where she comes over and finds him collapsed,
right,
on the floor. Now, actually, that does take place in the first book, but it's kind of all told. In kind of flashback style. We don't really see it happening. It's just kind of told to us. Now we actually get to see that.
In the second book, you actually go through that.
Well, in the second book, no, and she actually kind of starts visiting him and playing chess with him, and she finds out from her, and this is in the book. It's not in either film. She finds out from her boss, Armansky,
mm-hmm.
who happens to be very good friends with Holger Palmgren and kind of helped set this whole thing up.
Right.
She finds out from Armansky. She had thought after his stroke, she'd thought that he died, and she kind of, left that part of her life behind her. Especially once she kind of got stuck with Niels Bjurman, the evil man.
Right.
Armansky tells her, you haven't even gone to visit him. And so she starts going and visiting him and playing chess with him and kind of helping him,
rehabilitate.
Rehabilitate. And, that's something that they actually show that relationship as she comes back at the end and she's talking to him and saying, I found somebody, I found a new friend, and just all that wonderful stuff, which was just great to see. And as I recall, now my memory of the books may be spotty. I mean, it's all kind of, I've watched all 3 Swedish films and then I read all 3 books and then I watched this. So yeah. I may be wrong actually, but as I recall, there's none of that Palmgren interaction in the first Swedish film.
Okay. I actually can't. I haven't seen all of the Swedish. I only started watching the Swedish film today, and I'm not quite through it.
Gotcha. One thing that the Swedish film does keep in it that the American one didn't was Lisbeth's relationship with her mother.
And in the American film, her mother's not even a mention.
Yeah, she's not even brought up. In fact, all of the flashbacks that we see in the Swedish film to Lisbeth's childhood when she sets her father on fire,
right,
are completely left by the wayside in this. And we only have one when Mikael Blomkvist, Daniel Craig, is talking to Armansky and trying to find out, who this person is. And he said, she's had a rough life. Let's just let her be. And that's kind of just a hint. And then there's the bed scene when, they're kind of talking toward the end and
right.
and he's trying to find out, what happened to her and why she's a ward of the state. She says, tried setting my father on fire.
That was a fantastic pillow talk.
It is. It's really, you can see why there was so much love between them.
Right. It's interesting. I'm also, just as an aside, I'm very interested in the fact that they left out so much of Armansky's character in the film as well, in the Fincher film. Armansky played by Goran Visnich.
Something.
He was he's been in a bunch of stuff, but his most I think has probably any significant following thanks to his longtime run in ER. He's a fantastic actor, and he really is. He gets a few headshot scenes in this film. Gets maybe 3 minutes of screen time, which I think is a shame.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's
really
a character that's a character that serves a definite role for in the book in particular as a guide, as sort of lighthouse character for Lisbeth Salander, and I think it's a testament to the solid sort of foundation of the film that in fact they were able to minimize the Armansky character in the film as much as they did and not make it feel like a gaping development hole.
Right. He's a tricky character to do a lot with. I mean, obviously, he's somebody who's trusted Lisbeth more than anyone else has, and given her, a career essentially.
Trusted her, and I think had deep affection for her, like romantic affection for her in the book, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, there's definitely some hint of that. I mean, it's never pursued him to her, and because of that, it's almost like unrequited love sort of thing. But at the same time, he's married, and it really is just him, almost just wanting to just take care of her and just kind of protect her from things.
It's one of those very sort of fragile paternal romantic relationships.
Yeah. It's an interesting relationship, and it's not pursued at all in the Swedish films, and his role is even in the second, interesting to see if there's more of him in the inevitable second and third American versions that we'll be following soon.
Well, I'm sure, although in everything I've been looking for, and this is, I guess, sort of an aside, I have not seen any hint that there is anyone actually working on the second or third film, and certainly Fincher's name is not attached to it. The next 5 films that he has in production are not this.
My understanding is that he has not committed to doing the other movies. I think Columbia Pictures has money, which I'm sure it will, because the buzz is huge. And the reviews are very positive. I'm sure it'll make a lot of money, and I'm sure they will make the entire trilogy. I believe that they got Daniel Craig and Rooney Mara. David Fincher, though, I think only committed to the first one, and I think his reaction was, well, we'll see how things go. And, he was kind of like maybe willing to look at it if he felt like there was more that he wanted to do with it. This was just an interesting statistic, just talking about the Swedish film a little bit longer. It was released in early 2009, and the information I found on the internet whenever somebody wrote it, it is the most viewed Swedish film ever. In Sweden, the total admissions, as in just people going in to watch it, it's above 1 million people, and that's in a country with not quite 10 million people. So that's like just over 10% of the population seen it.
Wow.
And I was trying to figure out what that really meant statistic wise, and so I was looking at the U.S. and taking our population, which is about 307 million in 2009. If 10% of our population had seen a movie, that's like 30.7 million people,
right?
And then if you took an average ticket price, say $10 a ticket, if you took all the different prices across the country and averaged out to $10 a ticket, that means a movie that would have to, have about, 30 million people. So it'd have to make about again, about $300 million just in the U.S. box office. And that puts it almost up there in like the top 20 U.S. films, money-making films of all time. Number one is Avatar, which made $760 million, which is quite a chunk of change. And I'm sure a lot of that was from 3D ticket boosts.
Right.
But number 20, Lord of the Rings, that just in the U.S., that made $342 million. So if you take the Lord of the Rings film, The Two Towers, and you look at how much money that made and how popular it was in our country, and you take that and you put it in Sweden, that's how popular this film was in Sweden.
But you actually make a good point. Like, what is the average cost of the ticket in Sweden?
Yeah, I have no idea. I mean, they don't give me ticket prices in Sweden or how much money it made in Sweden.
Yeah.
All they have
is the number of people,
the total admissions who had gone to see it. So
it's we're sort of I see what you're doing is trying to find an apples to apples comparison, but it almost seems to me like the insinuation is that it is this movie. It would be difficult to make a parallel that's so successful if we were to actually break out ticket prices. I think you're right. That 3D ticket sales of Avatar, I'd be surprised if we had hit even close to, 10-15% of the population that saw that movie.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really popular film.
That's huge.
Yeah. And then I didn't see any statistics about how many people in the U.S. saw it, but I guarantee it's nowhere near that number.
Yeah. And most of them have seen it on Netflix, and so it's not even the same sort of moneymaker.
Yeah, right. Except, it's based on a trilogy which is sold, I don't think I got the statistics for the book, but it's been translated in, dozens of languages, and it's, just the international bestseller, sold all across the country, all across the world. It's a hugely popular trilogy. Here it is. It's sold just in the U.S. The book has sold 15 million copies.
Wow.
So yeah,
it's okay. So we haven't talked about what the movie is about, but and I don't know necessarily that we are capable of doing a simple synopsis. But I think it's interesting. There's an interesting parallel I read that got me thinking. That David Fincher had been quoted in one of his reviews. He had said that I think it was about the music. Actually, it was not actually David Fincher. No, it was Trent Reznor in the Los Angeles Times, who was talking about working with David Fincher, saying it's given him the freedom to actually work with somebody who doesn't attempt in any way to dumb down his material for his audience.
Yeah.
Right. And largely you can say the same about Trent Reznor and his work, and through Nine Inch Nails, and then his work through, the music that he creates and has created for David Fincher with The Social Network, and again with the Dragon Tattoo is complex and fascinating to listen to, and stands so well on its own, as its own piece of work that almost merits its own discussion. He and Atticus Ross, between the two of them, really have done some very interesting stuff music wise. I mean, I think Social Network, the score is just amazing. I know it's kind of a love it or hate it type of music, but I'm definitely in the love it crowd. Yeah.
And
so get back to the book. What Stieg Larsson has created is not a simple text, and I think that's charitable.
And yeah, it is a very hard story to read, and hence watch. And I learned this about Stieg Larsson as I was reading about this. When he was a teenager, he actually witnessed a gang rape of a young girl, and who was like also a teenager, I think 14. And he didn't do anything about it, and he has never forgiven himself for not helping. And the girl's name who was raped happened to be Lisbeth, and he kind of took that idea and created this character from that, and always from there on really started trying to fight against anything that was anti-Semitic or was very violence toward women, anti-racist. He was really trying to make things right, and I think that stemmed from that moment in his life, and it really did make it really does come through in the book, and it makes it something that is very challenging to look at. Yes, on the surface, it is kind of just a murder mystery story. We have an investigative journalist here who, along with this really fascinating computer hacker character, kind of team up to try to solve this 40-year-old murder mystery, which it's a very interesting story in its own right. But at the same time, you're really starting to look at all these other things that that he is putting up there in the forefront for people to pay attention to: violence against women, the corruption of businesses and corporations, this political evils of the world, like the Nazism that still kind of festers in the society, and just these hatreds that people have. And I think that is why, one of the reasons why the series has become so popular, is because there's a lot more to it than just a simple murder mystery.
I think you're spot on. And one of the things I really love, if as much as I say this is not a simple story, it's really not. The layers upon layers of complexities that Larsson added to the tale itself are really what make it such kind of rich fodder for discussion. But Roger Ebert actually in his own review had really, I think, said it right. If you subtract all the computers and the geeks and the goth girls and the nose piercings and the motorcycles and dragon tattoos, what we have at the bottom is a classic Agatha Christie plot. The island is a sealed room. And in so many ways, I think that's one of the themes that we can look at as a parallel to really any country that has a geographic boundary that allows part of its population to exist in a vacuum. And what that island is a place where Nazism has never quite left it, where people who are most true to their base have never actually progressed beyond where they were when they were 25.
Yeah.
So in that way, I mean, this story could just as easily have taken place in our deep south, or on in the north, or Long Island, or any place where you have a group that has lived in isolation for so long.
Yeah, it creates a very interesting locale for a tale like this. And I think, the comparison to the drawing room mystery is very accurate. And actually, I think Christopher Plummer's character even, brings that up at one point in the film. It's the classic drawing room mystery. The room is the island.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's a very interesting way to frame this story. And then I think then you throw in a character like Lisbeth Salander, which everybody is talking about how unique of a character this is, and how you never see a character, or rarely these days do you see a character that people are so drawn to, but who is so just antisocial, violent, not easy to understand, does things that seem out of out of sorts, or almost even out of character sometimes, but that's, that is part of the character. And everybody is just drawn to this fascinating character. And, I was just listening to them talking about it on the Charlie Rose show, and, they're kind of comparing her to this, almost like, a fragile animal almost. It's like this cornered character that you don't fully understand, but there's these emotions that you can definitely come through her,
I think that's a great way to put it, that sort of cornered animal. And what's so interesting about that character is about the character of Salander is that that there is almost no sort of emotional arc to her. She just always exists at an emotional high, right? At a peak at which you're never quite sure if she is, all you know is she's not at rest, but you're never quite sure when she's going to pop. And I think that's such an interesting, it's really played so well in the film, particularly the scenes like in the subway when her bag gets stolen. And I think, we haven't talked yet about Rooney Mara, who I just almost don't know what to say about her. She's just, I'm so moved by the performance, but the nuance with which she makes that transition between, tense kind of just ball of explosive energy to the explosion where she chases that guy in and gets her laptop back and eventually sort of escapes is such a powerful moment. And yet it is so perfectly executed. It's not overdone. It is what it is. And you move on. You get to learn that bit about her character and move on, that it really stands as a highlight in the film for me.
Yeah, and that is actually a fantastic scene, because another really interesting thing that I think Steven Zalian and David Fincher latch onto is there's a quick shot, actually a couple quick shots of one of the other people on the escalator who sees her race past them and grab this bag from this guy, and they kind of go at it on the stairs. And this guy, like this viewer watching what's going on, pulls out his cell phone to call the cops, and he's just as likely to be calling to report that she's trying to steal his bag rather than him trying to steal her bag,
right? Because
of the way she looks. It's this character that you just, any other person out there in the world, when they see somebody like her run past them and tackle somebody on an escalator to rip their bag off their shoulders, if they didn't see that he had stolen her bag, they would instantly think she was the one who was the aggressor.
Exactly.
And and you don't hear the phone call. You don't know what the guy is saying, but it's set up in such a way where, it almost doesn't matter. It could be one or the other. And it's a really interesting way to portray that society's view of her.
Well, and that's exactly it. It's almost, it is equally a commentary on society's view of her as it is her and the thief's view of life in this society, because it happens, and it happens so fluidly that he gets off the train, he takes the bag, he goes up the stairs and moves back into life, right? He slows down and just rides the escalator. He is then attacked by her in this vicious, lash of energy, and then it's over, and it happens so quickly.
Yeah, and then she darts back, hops on the subway,
and she gets on the train, and she's done. It's over. Yeah. And her the only thing that you see in terms of her sort of emotional reaction, it's not about being robbed. It's not about the being victorious and getting her bag back. It's the absolute depression, the desolation that comes over her face when she notes that her laptop has been damaged. And that was really powerful. It's interesting that you make this the comment about sort of her as the sort of that anti-hero, right?
Yeah.
And I've heard this suggested elsewhere that it's that we're tired of the hero with the that's the 30-something white male with the 3 days stubble on his chin.
Right.
Sort of, and this is, opening directly opposite, Ghost Protocol, with Tom Cruise, who's maybe not 30-something, but certainly sports the stubble. And but I wonder what it is that we find so appealing about her. And I don't think she is necessarily anomalous. I think, if you look at characters like Dexter, from the Jeff Lindsay series, and then the is it Showtime TV show? Jeff Lindsay wrote the books of the Dexter character, and then I think it's a Showtime show now in going on season 6, I think.
It's
this character that these are characters, right, that are positioned as the hero and are celebrated by us as the audience because they tap into our very real and most base feelings, the thoughts that we carry around in our heads that we are terrified to talk about.
Well, but also I think there is that to her. Now I'm speaking specifically just of her. There definitely is that to her, but at the same time, there is this real fragility to her that there's something about her that that you can just sense. And I mean, they talk about it in the film. A lot has happened to her in the past.
Yeah.
She's had a hard life. Nothing's been easy. We get little bits and pieces of that in this version. You get a lot more of it in the book, and a little more of it in the Swedish film. But there's a lot of stuff has happened to this girl, and we can really start seeing why she's this way. And it gives us this real sense that there's more there, but she's really put up these walls, and underneath, we can see how loyal she is to Armansky, and she's definitely somebody who has a passion to her. We see the club scene, and then she brings the girl home with her, and I think there's a lot of emotion to her, particularly as the film develops. And at the end of the film, it's heartbreaking when Lisbeth finally feels like, she's kind of fallen in love, and there's more going on with her and Mikael than she had planned, and she feels like maybe there's something there, and she goes and talks to her former guardian, and tells him, I think I found somebody. And then, you see her, she gets this really expensive jacket for him and everything. And then she goes out to go give it to him, and she sees him with Erica Berger, Robin Wright, walking away, arms around each other, because, he has all these kind of quirky relationships, and her heart is just broken. And you see that in her face as she's looking. And no matter how anti-heroic or dark or just scary or whatever it is that she may seem, that moment in the film, I mean, if the audience isn't with her 100% and just like having their heart broken as she sees that, I mean, it's a brutal scene to watch, and it's a tragic ending to the film.
Well, and that's what I mean by what makes her the character. So someone who, in spite of how she looks, that we all relate to, because deep down, I wonder just how many of us, when we talk about sort of our base impression of ourselves, aren't wearing leather jackets and have, and have tattoos and piercings, because we, that's who we are in our own heads.
Mm-hmm.
But we live in this sort of fear that we cannot do these things, that societal pressure has said we cannot do those things. And the reason that she is such a powerful character is, in spite of everything she has been through as a young girl, she continues to be abused by the system, quite literally by representatives of the system. And yet she is somebody who has conquered the fear of societal pressure and has taken back that power. And she then literally takes back the power throughout the course of the film. And I think that's what makes her so powerful. Is she has conquered that fear and takes back power in a over every system that tries to exert power upon her, and that's what we really relate to. I find that fascinating.
It is fascinating. It really is, and it does get frustrating. In the second and third books, when you can see people trying to help her and trying to, people from the system who now are actually trying to help her and make things right. And she's so frustrated with the system, and she's just so done with it all that she basically tells them all, she doesn't want their help. It gets very frustrating when people are actually now finally coming to her saying, "We want to help you," and she doesn't want their help.
Right. I actually just cracked open the book, right after I saw the movie. I came back and I popped it on the Kindle and started reading the second book, The Girl Who Played with Fire, and it's wow. Starts off with something of a bang. Unlike the first book, Dragon Tattoo, man, the first 100 pages was a snoozer.
I can't remember.
That goes to.
It does take a little bit.
I mean, it's like it's like the very worst of the Lord of the Rings. I mean, they might as well have filled Dragon Tattoo with singing dwarves. Because it's all a litany of family history, and then of corporate, of the corporate background and financial stuff, and it's all good background. But one of the things that I think Fincher did so well was make research sexy.
Yeah, and I mean, that is very much a part of the book. There's so much research going on. Very much a part. You could not make the movie without figuring out a way to play research dramatically. Yeah,
you couldn't do it.
It's an interesting thing to comment on, because another series of films that was made that actually involved a lot of research also was the the Da Vinci Code and Angels and Demons. That was another series of books where they talked about how interesting it would be to try to translate that, because there's so much research and there's so much, of that character working on computers and all this stuff. And people, I think laughed a little bit at some of the moments in the films when, Tom Hanks is just like, "Quick, I've got to get to a library." And it sounded
but that's exactly how it played in the book. It's exactly how it played.
Right. But in these films, you're right. It comes across in a really fluid way, where the research just kind of, instead of just being research, and this is something I think he did a lot better than the Swedish version, as he's learning research, or as Lisbeth is learning research, which whoever it is who's actually researching, we're getting, flashbacks to moments that they're seeing, flashbacks of moments on the bridge, flashbacks of, young Harriet as she's on the at the parade. We're getting a lot of really interesting things, and I loved what they did with Harriet, her voice reading the Bible verses that they were saying. It's just, I don't know, something about her voice, and just that just had this real haunting presence to it. And when we'd hear her reading those Bible verses, it was quite haunting, I felt.
I'm interested, and not to go down the road of a spoiler, but I kept trying to think back, because I did not know that one of the significant changes between the book and this version of the film, and I don't know how the Swedish version of the film plays this particular element, is the end of the book, and the big reveal,
right, which is a big change,
which is a significant change, and as I walked out of the theater, I kept thinking back to those voices of Harriet reading the Bible verses. Was that Jolie Richardson?
I don't think so. I don't think it was.
You think it was another younger sounding actress?
Well, I think it was the young girl that they had play Harriet.
Being Harriet, okay.
In all the images. All the flashback scenes. I mean, that's what I assumed. I don't think we ever really hear any of those flashback characters speak, other than, very muted as we hear other things going on. And just, a quick aside, what an interesting role for Julian Sands to take. It's like the young Christopher Plummer character. It's like I don't know what Julian Sands has been up to these days, but to see him pop up as a flashback character who you never really hear speaking, I was like, that's a pretty interesting role to kind of take.
No kidding. A guy that we really haven't seen in a number of years. Like, what has he been up to?
I don't think he's been up to a whole lot. Not much. But the flashbacks, I think were done really interestingly, and I actually liked what they did with the change at the ending with. It's what really interested me with that.
I didn't actually notice. It has been, it's been several years since I read the book, and the movie played that change so well that I actually had to go back and read the last chapter of the book to remember not the last chapter, but before the prologue, during the big reveal, to catch what actually happened, because it was not, it was a significant alteration. I feel like we're sort of dancing around it to avoid the big spoiler, but I don't think it would make sense because we haven't really talked about the plot.
It wouldn't make sense, but it's definitely a change with the character and obviously what he's trying to find over the course of the story. It's the interesting thing is about it is it's still in both films and in the book. Honestly, it's such a strange story because it kind of. In every version, you conclude the murder mystery long before the end of the story.
Right.
In every case, you still have a lot to talk about. And I think the Swedish film, for me, after he solves the mystery, felt the longest. Like I think it felt like there was a lot more going on after that, as I recall.
As there was in the book. I mean, the big murder mystery reveal happens. Really, there's a lot left at the end of the book. I mean, especially in terms of Salander's, efforts with the, Wennerstrom.
Yeah, the whole Wennerstrom affair. That whole thing.
There was a lot of resolution to be had.
Yeah, and I guess, that whole Wennerstrom case is the very first thing that we hear about in the story, or in the films. I think in both films, it's Mikael being sentenced for libel in the Wennerstrom case. And we still definitely have to wrap that up in the film. We also have to wrap up the relationship story between Mikael and Salander, and it takes a while. It does take a while. I don't know if there's really any other way to have wrapped it up, unfortunately.
But that's what sort of I walked away with, saying that the pacing of this movie, and I think there was another key element I want to talk about, which is the merging of their storylines in the beginning of the film. But at the end of the film, it did not feel jarring to me. It didn't feel like it felt absolutely appropriate, and in so many ways, the way they played Salander's efforts to resolve the Wennerstrom affair in favor of resolving their relationship issues, right? I mean, in so many ways, her, efforts directly supported those last two scenes where, she met him outside the, outside the offices. And then later, after she got the jacket and went to see and saw him with Erica, that all played so well. It was like a beautiful, warm bow on the rest of the story. I didn't feel like it was out of place at all.
I didn't either. It's kind of like, the Lord of the Rings stories where, a lot of people complained about, there's so many endings to that Return of the King. But, they all had their place. And I I personally didn't feel it didn't bother me, and it was kind of the same with this. It all of those little things needed to be wrapped up, and I didn't mind watching that another 20 minutes to kind of tie all that up, and I felt it was the film had been done so well that investing the extra time to finish those stories was not a problem.
Okay, I've got a couple more things I want to ask you about.
Okay.
The first one. Well, okay, while we're talking about plot stuff, how do you feel about the way they merged the two stories, the Salander story and the Blomkvist story, in the beginning of the film? Because in the book, there is a significant portion of the book where these two characters are apart.
Right.
And you think they're different movies for the longest time, or certainly different books for the longest time.
Definitely.
And I think this was, it read as a challenge to me. What was your take?
I thought it was incredibly well done. Incredibly well done. The book, I mean, it's not quite as separated as Lord of the Rings, where it's like literally you spend the first half of the book with, Frodo and Sam, and then the second half of the book you're following Aragorn and his guys as they go, on their separate tale. It's not quite that separated, but definitely in the book it's like, okay, here's Mikael's story, and then you go and you follow her for a while, and you kind of jump back and forth until they finally come together. The way that, and I haven't looked at the script, I don't know if a lot of that came from Zalian and how he actually wrote the script, or if it came from the editing that Kirk Baxter and Angus Wall did in the film, the way that they cut it together. I don't know, but it was so good. I mean, that's one thing that I said to my wife when it was done. I'm like, man, I mean, they took this, I can't remember how many pages the book was, 500 or 600 pages.
Yeah.
They found, to me, the perfect way to condense scenes, to have scenes jumping back and forth, to tell this story so quickly. I mean, man, I swear there were some scenes in this that were no more than like 15 seconds of screen time, just like very short scenes where we get in, we get the information from the scene, and we get out. And, we're just moving from character to character. We're getting all the information we need. And it worked really well.
Absolutely. I noted the same thing. Just the way this film was cut together as a film that is so heavily based on the drama, right? On just talking. It was cut together like an action film, particularly in the first 35 minutes.
Yeah.
It was very powerful. Now, the other thing that I really was struck by, and I still don't know how this sits with me, the opening credits. Gorgeous. That was stunning film work in the opening credits.
Frighteningly gorgeous, right? It was very disturbing. It harkened back for me to the days when David Fincher was directing music videos for Trent Reznor and Nine Inch Nails. I mean, it really had that sort of music video feel. I don't think that David Fincher actually directed that bit. I think one of his guys who does his titles, I think, did that for him. But man, if that doesn't set the tone for what we're about to see, it is pretty trippy. I mean, I read one comparison, I can't remember where they said it felt like a James Bond opening for kind of like a strange, bondage, S&M sort of tale. It really has that feel where you've got the woman's body and this kind of liquid black leather, or not leather, but whatever.
It looks like liquid latex kind of.
Exactly, where it's just kind of like
being poured over shapes and curves.
And bodies and burning birds and like crazy computer wires shooting out and like sticking into people's faces. And I mean, it was a really, really trippy opening?
Done to Led Zeppelin's Immigrant Song, a remake.
Performed by Karen O from the Yeah Yeah Yeahs.
Right.
So,
which was, another interesting one. Trent Reznor's, comment that he didn't, obviously he didn't write the title sequence, and he just, sometimes he says you just got to let go, because Fincher's a guy who knows what he wants, and he doesn't just come up with these things out of thin air.
Mm-hmm.
And, even Trent Reznor says, and this is Trent Reznor, who reports spending 14 months working on this score.
David Fincher, I was just listening to him, like I said, on the Charlie Rose show, talking about the music. I was listening to the soundtrack earlier today, and it's a really haunting score. It's not one that you probably would put in too often to just listen to on its own. It works really well in the film. But Fincher was saying it's one thing that they were really trying to do with the music. They were trying to get across that sense of cold and just that iciness that you have in Sweden, that, this cold and this silence that permeates everything. And I think it really came through.
It absolutely came through. There's another piece that stuck out to me, and this is one that relates to just the overall sound design, and I think probably one of the reasons that they worked for 14 months on the score itself is that this score, more than any I've seen in recent history, is as part of the fabric of the film's audio as any I have seen. I mean, when you look at the ambient sounds of the film that are where the music is actually tuned to the same key as machines in the film, to make those transitions, the sort of the audio transitions, serve as just as powerful as the visual transitions. That, I mean, this is an intricately and intimately tied score to the general audio of the film, and it's worth noting that as you're watching it, as it just sort of washes over you, that they have really, it's more than just how can we put a 15-second beat into this scene to make this transition. It's the audio is going to serve as much as every sound effect and Foley effect that we can put into this film.
Yeah,
it was really powerful.
Yeah, the audio was just stunning, all the way through. Everything. I'm not quite sure. I actually didn't look yet to see who did the audio. I think it was Ren Kleiss who did the audio in Social Network, and so it's same thing here. I mean, he's just it really does a stellar job. And since we've talked about the audio, I think it's we should definitely mention the look of the film, and how much that mirrors and ties into that same feel that the audio has. And I think Jeff Cronenweth's cinematography is just it's just thing. It's this. It really captures the cold iciness of everything in this world, not just of Sweden, but the world of this murder mystery and these people tied up in it. It's really a beautiful film.
How do they do that? It seems like everything is, it's almost just a little bit blue on the white balance and just a little bit, what is that, overexposed? I'm not sure how to describe it.
Yeah, and I haven't quite looked into exactly what it was that he was doing. I know that Jeff Cronenweth is somebody who really likes to play with the darks in film, that the stuff that you can get out of that. I also think that they tend to put a lot of which kind of doesn't may not make sense to a lot of people, but put in a lot of light when they're lighting the sets, so that they can actually get a shallower depth of field. And he really does this thing where the depth of field is so narrow in many cases, where even on somebody's face, there's only a very thin strip of what's actually in focus on the face. And it's you really have to know how to work with your depth of field and with your lighting and all of your tools in order to really make that happen. And that may be why it does look a little overexposed in some areas.
Yeah, and almost as much as that shallow depth of field, I think you're exactly right. It's bringing me back to just some of the Rooney Mara close-ups where you see, where she's really struggling, and you see, her eyelash is out of focus to her eyeball. I mean, there are some incredibly nuanced close-ups in this film, and at the same sort of on the opposite end of the spectrum, the landscapes that they get of Sweden and of Hedestad Island are just barren and haunting from the very outset. The grays that they capture in this film are really fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, you really feel the cold.
You do.
I think they really pulled that off. Yeah.
Goodness, I don't have anything else on my list I really wanted to ask you about. I feel like what else do you have?
Something here's something we haven't mentioned at all. This is going to be the first film of our David Fincher. I'm calling it the Fincher-Fest. We're going to basically look at all of Fincher's films.
This is the Benjamin Button Fincher-Fest of movies we like.
Yes, exactly. We're starting at his most recent and going to his earliest. Although I think with Alien 3, we may actually pull out and put into the
Alien Fest.
The Alien Fest, right. But so as we go backward and we watch his films, we'll talk more about this with Social Network, Benjamin Button, Zodiac. These are all films that I think starting with Zodiac, really where it's like all digital filmmaking. And
that's really good. I'm glad you brought that up. Keep going.
And I think that Fincher once said in an interview, I'll just read this quote here. Daily is, kind of the footage that you shot that day. And they always like to go look at it to see what they caught. In the film days, you weren't able to actually, look at it right away. You had to send it off, get it developed. And so here's his comment. Dailies almost always end up being disappointing. Like the veil is pierced and you look at it for the first time and think, oh my God, this is what I really have to work with. But when you can see what you have as it's gathered, it can be a much less neurotic process. So what he's saying here is with these digital cameras, they're basically able instantly to see what it is they're getting. They can be cutting it while they're getting it. And really they can be pulling all of the exact things that they want. And his editors, Kirk and Angus, have talked about this before, where it's not just getting the best take. They'll look at all the best takes, but then they look at all the best ways that a certain sentence was said. And then they look at all the best ways that a certain word was said, almost to the point where they're looking at how a certain syllable was said, or how a certain frame was, how somebody's eye moves in a certain frame. And they actually can get that detailed now, where they can kind of pull all of these different pieces together, and they can almost create exactly the movie that they set out to make. And so it's a very interesting thing. And I think David Fincher said it about this particular film. This was essentially exactly the film that they set out to make. So, I think there's a lot to be said for what you can do with digital filmmaking now, and how just in these last few years, since they started really making all digital films and being able to kind of use the tools to that extent, real filmmakers who really want to make it exactly what they set out to make are going to take those tools, and they're going to be able to use them in such a way as you will end up getting pretty much what they're trying to get done.
I'm trying to think who else says it because Fincher was, if I remember correctly, he was one of the pioneers really of moving quickly to digital. Even before some of the technology had really cemented, and that has happened fairly recently. in terms of just the overall sort of timeline of filmmaking. But there are some others who really took to digital early. I think, was it the Coen brothers or the Wachowskis? One of the brothers.
Gosh, I'm not sure about those guys. I know the Coen brothers really took to the what you could do with
non-linear and coloring and non-linear
coloring,
editing.
yeah, and how you could do that sort of stuff. George Lucas obviously has been kind of pro digital filmmaking.
I sort of didn't want to say him.
Michael Mann actually, he shot Collateral entirely digitally on the Vipers. I believe, back in whenever that film came out, 2004, 5, somewhere around there. It's definitely something where it has its followers, and I think there's some filmmakers who are still trying to stick with film as long as they can. But I think we're almost at a point now where, now that Kodak has, I believe, declared bankruptcy, I think pretty much digital is going to be it.
I actually met the photographer, heard him speak, the last still photographer. That's what I do most of my time is shooting still now, and his name is Steve McCurry. He actually shot the last roll of Kodachrome film.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And to hear him talk about it, it took him a year to shoot it. He had loaded it in this old camera, and he had moved exclusively to digital some years back, and so he just carried around this old camera and just would find just the right image, and ended up shooting his last frame in India. And really marks the end of an era. And so you think about, I think about Steve McCurry in this case. I think about, here was a legendary National Geographic photographer. He's the one who shot the Afghan girl, the legend.
Yep.
That was McCurry's work, and
wow.
and has documented the globe. Who is going to shoot the last film on film? When will we no longer be able to really call it film and mean media?
Right.
That's an interesting transition,
and that will be an interesting little note, to say, oh, that was the last film shot on film.
Right.
It'll really kind of be sad, and just talking about that kind of breaks my heart a little bit.
I know. We'll hold a moment of silence, or let Skype do that for us. We also didn't talk about just some of the individual performances in this film, which I think is worth at least noting. It's a little bit early for award season, although the Golden Globe nominations are out, and Rooney Mara has gotten a best performance by an actress in a dramatic film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, along with Glenn Close, Meryl Streep, Tilda Swinton, Viola Davis.
Yeah, right. It's
for essentially, her first real lead role of a real film.
Can you imagine the Cinderella story for this girl? I mean, Rooney Mara, she was maybe part of why I am so stunned by her performance in this movie is that the only thing I know her from is the first 7 minutes of The Social Network.
Yeah, I think she was in the remake of Nightmare on Elm Street, and maybe some other sort of remake like that. But
she's got in terms of screen cred, she's got a pretty short history, and yet she crushes in this movie. She crushes. I thought she was absolutely fantastic. She's just stunning to watch. You put a hoodie on her and a nose ring, and she's a 15-year-old angst-ridden punker. I mean, it was unbelievable transformation. The other was Daniel Craig. How did you 30 seconds or less? How did you feel about Daniel Craig and what he brought to this movie?
I thought he was so great. I was a little. I wasn't sure about him initially. I was like, okay. I mean, I really enjoy him as an actor, and I think he can do a lot. I thought he ended up doing a really great job bringing a non-James Bond sense to this character, where he was stumbling down hills and just, a little more not prepared for the violence that was going to be coming.
I absolutely agree, and I feel like I've read so many reviews of this film that talk specifically about Craig's performance as, oh well, it's James Bond as a clumsy reporter.
Oh.
I did not feel that. I think that's absolutely downplaying what was perhaps one of his strongest performances. I thought he did a great job out of sort of that character, and I thought he was great. He looks good getting beaten up. Mm-hmm. I think that actually may be one of his strongest kind of attributes as an actor is letting himself be vulnerable physically, quite physically.
Yeah.
And he did a great job in this movie, just being sort of confused.
Yeah, he was great. I really loved him in this film. He was great. I mean, everybody. I mean, we should just, give our shout outs here. I mean, Christopher Plummer, you'll never go wrong with him.
I mean, that's why you don't need to say his name. He's always brilliant.
He is. Robin Wright, if there's ever an actress who can have a very small role, but just carry so much weight into that role, it's her. I mean, this and Moneyball, her, one scene maybe in Moneyball, maybe two.
Right.
I mean, there was so much to that character. I'm like, God, she really just knows. I mean, Steven Zalian again, writing the characters, but I mean, she just really carries a lot of weight. Stellan Skarsgård is fantastic as Martin Vanger. Really creepy.
Oh, really creepy. Stellan Skarsgård. I mean, he's got a fantastic CV, and I think he's one of the legendary players that we're going to be talking about in terms of character actors. I think he's got a place in history.
A very interesting trivia note, side note. I'm not sure if you've seen the posters for Girl with the Dragon Tattoo that are out there, and the little the phrases that they have on them. I can't find either of them right now, of course. But Stellan Skarsgård, who is actually Swedish, he actually, here they are. Evil shall with evil be expelled. And the other, what is hidden in snow comes forth in the thaw. They are both Swedish proverbs. And he told them to David Fincher during the filming. And Fincher liked them so much, and he thought they fit the story so well, he actually decided to employ them as the taglines for the film.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, this is a great. That's fantastic. Great little side note, yeah.
The one other point that just came up to me as soon as we started talking about Stellan Skarsgård being Swedish, one of the things I thought they dealt with really interesting. I think it's interesting they even dealt with it, is atheism in this film.
It was interesting, and it was it played nicely with the Christian beliefs that also come up in the film.
Well, what's so interesting about it is just being a sort of a Hollywood film, insofar as it is.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure that they necessarily needed to bring it up, and yet. It really I wonder if people actually sort of are aware of it, but Sweden is one of the most atheist countries on the planet. I mean, it's 20% of the country actually believes in God in Sweden.
Wow, I actually had no idea. That's interesting.
And so that is as opposed to kind of. And I actually don't know where the United States actually fares on that list, but you get into kind of the Turkeys of the world, and it's up into the 90s, 90%. And so I find that interesting that is played in this film as much as it is his relationship with his daughter. That is the Mikael Blomkvist character with his daughter, who was off to Bible camp, and they actually make a sort of a character issue with atheism.
Yeah. It was nice. It was nice to see
a major property dealing with it.
Yeah. It's just something where they bring it up. It's not what the story's about, but it's something that's there. Yeah. People acknowledge it. And it's I think they did it pretty nicely, actually.
I the more we talk about it, the more I love this movie. I want to go see it again. This is going to be one of my favorite films. I really enjoyed how they put this film together.
Yeah, it was a very, very solid film, and I think any of the accolades that it gets, whether just mentions or actual wins, or even just the praise, or however much it makes, I think it's probably worth saying that it deserves it. It's just a very well-made film.
All around.
Yeah.
So we are, as you mentioned, we're on our Fincher kick. Next week, we are going to jump back into The Social Network, which is, I think, it should be an interesting conversation since it's essentially the exact same team that put together this movie.
Yeah, right. I mean, all these people, Jeff Cronenweth, Trent Reznor, Atticus Ross,
Kirk Baxter, Angus Wall,
yeah.
Scott Rudin produced.
Yeah, Sean Chafin, his I don't think she's his David Fincher's wife, but his partner. I don't know if they've just never married or what. A lot of his team kind of have been following him, and so we'll be talking about the same bunch.
I very much look forward to it. Another terrific film next week, and I think that's all we've got.
Yeah, I think we covered this one pretty well, and here we go. Let's plow through Fincher.
I don't like how you said that. It just seemed mean.
Yeah, it didn't come across very well. I take it back. Let's delve into I don't know.
You've derailed. You've totally derailed.
Here at The Next Reel, we've been passionately discussing movies week after week since 2011. That's a lot of movies and a lot of conversation.
Sure is, Pete, and to be honest, it's a lot of work too, but it's work that we love. If you have been enjoying our show, we'd like to remind you that there are ways to support us even if you're not able to become a member just yet. You might have heard us talk about our new watch page where we've listed every movie that we've talked about paired with Amazon or Apple links to rent or buy the movie.
Now we'd like to introduce you to our originals page. Let's take a trip down memory lane, Andy. Do you remember what the first film we discussed on The Next Reel was that was an adaptation?
Well, let's see. It wasn't obviously our Indiana Jones series because those were all original. Then we did Charlie Kaufman. Of course, it was adaptation from Susan Orlean's Orchid Thief.
Exactly. We have covered quite a few adaptations over the years, and now we're providing a way for our listeners to delve into the original source material.
That's right. Just head over to thenextreel.com/originals, and you can see the list of all the adaptations that we have discussed.
From our David Fincher series, featuring The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, The Social Network, Zodiac, Benjamin Button, and Fight Club.
To our Paranoia trilogy with The Parallax View and All the President's Men, we have covered a variety of adaptations.
Those were some great discussions, especially Fight Club. And let's not forget our baseball series with The Natural and Field of Dreams, adapted from Shoeless Joe.
And Up in the Air and Thank You for Smoking. So many memorable conversations.
Absolutely. And you know what's exciting? Each purchase you make through our links doesn't cost you any extra, but a percentage goes to support The Next Reel and our family of shows.
You can support us while diving deeper into these fantastic stories, whether it's the paper, audiobook, or Kindle version.
We've also included plays and movies. If they were the source, we've put it on there.
So what are you waiting for? Head to thenextreel.com/originals, support The Next Reel, and get your next great read today.
I'm off to reread Fight Club. Now, where did I put my Kindle?